this is a probable cause affidavit, and they don't have to lay out their whole case here. They just have to make up probable cause.
They went through a very lengthy analysis of the cell phone. What people have to understand is the cell phone is not like GPS.
That the scientist and the science behind this, when they do match his DNA with the DNA that was found at the crime scene, I think that will be an extremely important piece of evidence. 51%.
This is Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies.
Hello, Reporter Room investigators. Come on in, come on in. My name is Jessica Della Davies, and today we're going to be talking about the Bryan Kohberger case. A lot of new information is coming to light. So let's get started. Today, we're going to be talking about the Friday 9 p.m. Dateline Nbc special on this case. We are learning more about the type of photos that Bryan Kohberger had on his phone. Let's talk about the judge's recent rulings on this case. For those of you that guessed during our last poll that it was not a plea deal, but actually regarding BK's mental health exam, you are correct. The judge ruled that the prosecution will be allowed to have an independent expert evaluate Bryan Kohberger's mental health using a mental health exam. So the purpose of this would be to evaluate his mental well-being, identify any potential mental health disorders. And if you haven't subscribed to Reporter Room, please do. It's free and it helps me out so much. It might involve some questionnaires, some interviews, observations of his behavior. It'll be focusing on his cognitive abilities, his reasoning, his thinking, his memory, his mood, his overall mental state. And then the outcome would be to confirm that he is autistic or is not autistic, that he is does have OCD or he does not have OCD. Now, the defense wanted to be in there, which I think is interesting, during the mental health evaluation, and the judge said no, they don't get to be in there. So I thought that was very, very interesting. And the other really key thing that we learned is that Bryan Kohberger's family, even though some of them are going to be called to testify, and we have talked about on this channel, speculation alert, that we think that his sister may have turned him in and that maybe his sister is going to be taking the stand. Let me know what you think about this. But ultimately, the judge wrote in his order that Bryan Kohberger will be allowed to have his family in the courtroom. He does not think, the judge does not think, that their presence will harm the prosecution's case, so they can attend the entirety of the trial, and jury selection on this begins on July 30th. I will be airing this trial here on Reporter Room, so please make sure you are subscribed and that you've hit the notification bell so you don't miss an important update. So now let's talk about Steve Gonsalves and some of his revelations. They talked about how the fact that it's okay, I'm here to help you, how that actually made it a capital offense, because at that point he could have just left the scene. So maybe he would have gotten life in prison for doing away with Maddie and Kaylee, but he could have just left the scene and he didn't. He also said that because of what happened to Kaylee and the way she was done away with, the fact that she had been done away, so many times, I'm going to watch my words, that the 911 delay did not, I repeat, did not affect whether or not she would have survived this. And he believes that Dylan is huge to the case. And so this is coming from one of the parents. He said that the coroner told him that at least 2 of the victims had drowned from the wounds that had, poured inward into their lungs. That he shared that there was not, as people have described, blood all over the house, that it was somewhat contained. I'm not saying that the crime scenes weren't horrific. I think they were, but they wasn't like all over the house, like, everywhere, like people think. I've told you guys in the past, I don't think that these crimes sounded like what we think, because Ethan and Xana didn't call 911 either. And I think if you practiced and you knew how to do away with somebody and you started here, you would be able to silence somebody quickly. He also said that because some of the victims were in bed, that they had a blanket over them, and that this also helped contain things. So that may be, with Xana, when Dylan did see her, because we know now that Dylan saw Xana and thought she was passed out. Did she have a blanket on her or nearby? Is that why, Dylan didn't see anything and just thought she was drunk and asleep on the floor? My theory has always been that he did have some kind of a kit that, he was, drop things into a bag. We've heard that Bethany saw somebody dropping something into a bag near the patio doors. So the crime scene was not like what a lot of us thought it was. It was horrific, but there wasn't blood all over. So that makes more sense with the fact that, according to Ann Taylor, now she said this over a year and a half ago, so I don't know if this is still true or not. But she said they didn't find any DNA in the car, in the Hyundai Elantra. But he would, this was also talked about, and Steve said that he had been told, because the Hyundai Elantra, that law enforcement didn't get possession of that car till, more than 6 weeks after the crime, almost 7 weeks, because he was arrested on December 30th. That with the changes in temperature, the warm sun coming in, and then the cold, that this would have degraded whatever they were able to find anyway, in his opinion. He wanted people to stop blaming the roommates, and did clarify that the victims would not have survived if the roommates had called sooner. So I hope people will just, take a breath and give Dylan and Bethany some grace here. He said that they were afraid to call the police because of the multiple noise complaints. And, Steve thought that some of these noise complaints were being called in by Bryan Kohberger. What do you guys think? Steve talked about where Bryan Kohberger left the knife. Now, he said that he wasn't sure, but he did wonder why there was a shovel in his trunk. And he clarified, because we all wondered what kind of shovel this was, that it was not used for snow, that it was a shovel that you used for dirt. So maybe he buried it. Maybe he threw it in the river. I told you guys I thought it was in that reservation somewhere. But he did also share that the FBI had told him that they would not have been surprised if BK had surveilled that 1122 King Road home multiple times. So we have this, 23 phone pings, and now we're learning that there's CCTV footage of Bryan Kohberger in the area of the house, in addition to the phone pings. And Steve also said that he would not have been surprised if Bryan Kohberger had snuck into the house, but he also said because of COVID and the pandemic, that the floor plans of that house and lots of properties were out there online. So it's possible he would have been able to see the layout of the house. And we know that it was online because we've all seen the interior pictures of the house. We also heard reports about Xana's dad changing the lock on her bedroom door the weekend before these crimes. So did somebody go in her room and move some things around, like what happened with the WSU students? What do you guys think? Oh, and he also said that the reason that he believes that 911 was not called by Dylan and Bethany was because it was, a big football party weekend. They were not 21. They were both underage drinkers. And that they had, that they wanted to talk to somebody in the house that was over 21 before they called 911, because, there was alcohol in the house and they were intoxicated. And they didn't want to get Kaylee and Maddie in trouble. They didn't want to keep them from being able to graduate. They didn't want to keep, any of the victims from being able to take their finals and to get kicked out of school. So, Dylan was just 19. And this explains why she's reaching out to Kaylee and Maddie in her text messages too. And I think we'll get more context at the trial. Steve also mentioned that Bryan Kohberger used cleaning supplies, and he talked about from a lab for the car, cleaning supplies from a lab. So will the cleaning supplies, so these were professional level cleaning supplies. So will these trace back to the WSU criminology laboratory? Oh, he talked about the selfie, Steve did, and also shared that on the day of that Bryan Kohberger did call in sick to work at WSU. And he talked about him searching out this crime, a crime like this at the 1122 King Road home, that he did a Google search of a crime like this after the crimes were committed, but before law enforcement was called. So I think that's very interesting. Steve also shared that one of the sisters was suspicious of Bryan Kohberger. We had heard reports that one of his sisters was suspicious, and he characterizes this particular sister as being helpful, but says that other people in the family weren't helpful, weren't so much helpful, I think were his exact words. So, that lowers my opinion, of the parents. I understand them wanting to protect their son, but if you thought to not be helpful at all, I don't know what you guys think about that. I can understand on, one level, but then on another level, it's like, well, it does make me lose some respect for them a little bit. And you don't have to agree with me. We don't all have to agree. We're not going to all agree on every single detail on every single case. But Steve also alluded to the fact that BK had deleted his Amazon K-bar knife, his knife search history, and he mentioned that BK had knowledge of the crime that was not public knowledge. And that takes me back to Pappa Rogers. So was he alluding to the Pappa Rogers or that inside looking account on Reddit? We know that law enforcement got a warrant for Reddit. We also know they got a warrant for Meta, which is the parent company of Facebook, where Pappa Rogers was in a very nice true crime group, the Idaho Student True Crime Group, which I'm in and was in at the time. He talked about BK's weird interactions with females and said that it went all the way back to high school. So this would explain why BK was removed from high school. Steve said that BK was removed from various situations. So again, this makes me lose a little bit of respect for the parents, because was this a ticking time bomb that maybe they should have, been alerted to, or did they just really think their son had turned over a new leaf and could do better? I mean, I don't know what you guys think. But he said it was really frustrating to see how many failures of not following through to protect women, because his behaviors had escalated, that led to ultimately Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan all being done away with. And he just wonders if some of these had some if BK had some interventions along the way, maybe this wouldn't not. And again, he's innocent until proven guilty, but I'm not a judge. You're not a judge. We're not a jury. And this is not a courtroom. Could this have maybe ended differently if somebody would have intervened? So it sounds like, in my opinion, we need a law. We need like Kaylee and Maddie's law, or Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana's law. It sounds like we need a law that protects females from being harassed. And that does require maybe let me know what you think about this, some type of investigation into someone who's doing something like this, if they're escalating, as a deterrent, so things don't go this far. Because it sounds like there was, the WSU student who was getting spied on using cameras. It just seems like there was, failures leading up to this. The high school, whatever happened in high school, where it was so drastic, he was removed from his high school program and had to finish high school online. It just seems like there was so many problems with this guy. And I told you guys, I always wondered why both his sisters had mental health degrees, why they were, and Bryan too, why they were all studying psychology. And I think that Bryan studied psychology, in my opinion, because he was trying to figure out why he was the way he was. He, reportedly viewed himself as a sack of meat, and more disturbing was viewing other people as a sack of meat as a teenager. Please subscribe, leave me a comment, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.